The way art affects you dictates the value you place in it. Often when consuming any narrative for the first time, the things that click as effective content are the parts of it that run parallel to your own life experience. And beside that relatability are the way parts of said narrative fit in with the current state of the cast of characters you are following. Side content in games can be one of the most complex experiences to integrate depending on the scale of the main scenario. In many cases, games have side content that isn't emotionally tone mapped to the story. If you are given the freedom to do all side content at any point, you often run into consistency issues. Characters are reacting and perceiving things that happen in any given quest in a way that is fully outside of their current emotional state, a state determined by the status of the greater goal. This is an issue with most open world games. Immense freedom comes at a cost if there is not occasional gating or timing out of content. This issue also only affects a certain pool of players who take place in the additive content to begin with. Some stories and their most important beats will land all the same if you ignore side content entirely. However, there are instances where if side content is ignored, the level in which you are personally affected by Journey's End is lesser than someone who did. The best case scenario is that the main scenario can walk down the middle of both of these paths. In the case of modern Final Fantasy side activities, you will find yourself presented with important narrative content that can deepen your relationship with the characters, or the best optional combat encounters the game has to offer. On the other side of this is lifestyle content, moments to take a breath and enjoy the immersive elements of the world you are exploring, ideally placed in a way where the characters are meant to be taking that same breath, allowing time to just be human. Side quests can be used in infinite ways. Something as simple as an introduction to a game's feature set and mechanics, all the way to a full symbolization of a relationship and its means to an end. Quests can have long branching narratives that change your view of the world around you, or they can be short demonstrations of a simple act of lending a hand to those in need. Both have a place, both can be equally effective. Even a fetch quest can contain immense depth depending on who you're playing as and how they are developing as a character. Each variant of a quest needs to justify its existence. Otherwise, they contribute to a long-developed stigma created out of most studios using fetch quests or simpler content as a means to make a game look larger than it actually is. Final Fantasy, at the very least, lives mostly outside of this issue. People take in life at very different paces. There isn't a one-size-fits-all solution regarding side content. It will never be as simple as expanding scenarios to make them longer or having a game target only one variant of questing styles. Everyone has individual life experience. The way those experiences reach you and the way you are moved or unmoved by them contributes deeply to the perceived quality of a quest. These stories should, of course, first and foremost serve the actual world they take place in, but one's perceptiveness and how open you are to being affected by art can play a major role in what brings value. What one person finds to be a pointless quest is another person's most seen moment. It's important to be open to the idea that there are always groups of people who will have a better understanding of a quest at first glance because of a lived experience. Others may have a neutral or negative experience until there is deeper reflection. Everyone lives on both sides of this. Not every quest in a game is a reflection of what corners got cut during the development cycle. Final Fantasy protagonists live outside the norm. They don't often have the normal life experience of those struggling around them. Clive Rosfield was born into royalty and is made shield of his younger brother, who was unexpectedly chosen as the dominant of Phoenix over himself, combined with a mother who is clearly Joshua leaning. Clive carries the burden of many and has to constantly deal with the feeling of being considered lesser. Cloud and Noctis live very similar but distinct lives. They both grew up in feelings of isolation due to the death of a parent and navigated the beginnings of their journeys as insecure and emotionally scarred. They experienced two very different versions of having small communities. Royal upbringings create very interesting character dynamics when one is made to leave the kingdom. While Cloud is the only one of these three not of royal descent, he experiences this dynamic from a completely different angle. a want to compensate for his early opposing life by becoming great. All of these characters require escape. When considering who these characters are at their core, there are a couple things to keep in mind. What kind of side content that is on the surface unimportant would they realistically take part in, and where they are at in the story that would contribute to its value? One of the more overlooked concepts in RPGs and Final Fantasy in general is that while it is fantasy, there are so many normal people living within the fantastical. A lot of these characters are subject to collateral damage of the situation the protagonist fights against, some very poor and many very troubled. The tasks they would have you do, should offered, can't always be some sprawling, long, life-changing questline. With what some of these characters are going through, and often your association to some of that cause, the idea that in every instance they would trust these characters with a grand task is unrealistic. While there can be exceptions based on desperation, it isn't the most common outcome. For some of these characters, doing a small task for them is life-changing. It makes a single day just a little bit more manageable. There is a lot of beauty to be found in what is a simple exchange for one person and life-altering for another. 7 Remake is one of the first games that felt like it intentionally wanted to show that small tasks can come with big rewards. That reward might just not be immediate. It comes over time as the progression of a character. Sector 7 and Sector 5 questlines are instrumental in your realization of Cloud's mind opening up to the world around him. These people and their problems are not always going to be dramatically exciting, but their inclusion creates a more living world. Under the plate, everyone is just trying their best. Some of these situations he's assisting in are standard, and at the end of the day, Cloud is still a merc. And sometimes mercs take unconventional jobs when the right people ask for help. Side content can be so dynamic in how it serves you. When Rebirth came out, the questing was naturally going to expand. Being in the larger world outside of Midgar comes with even larger problems and a massive map for them to scale to. The content mostly expands because it's far more viable for the space they take place in. However, with a bigger world comes even more walks of life. A lot of this part of the world in these towns are not struggling the same way as your friends under the plate. These people are getting by just fine, and they appreciate what they have. It grants them the mental bandwidth and time to worry about their missing Queen's Blood card or becoming a better hunter. There is a stark contrast in headspace between those living in parts of Midgar and those outside of it. As such, the dynamic nature of the quests in Rebirth is able to realistically reflect that. Clive's goals change many times throughout Final Fantasy XVI. He starts in a place of seeking vengeance and slowly finds a wider purpose. His early questing consists of general helping of those who reside in Cid's hideaway and the world surrounding. Things such as delivering soup as a first side quest will always seem to catch critique. However, quests like this exist to deliver quick information and start a connection with the people of the hideaway, no matter how small. In under 3 minutes, you are given more context to the individual struggles of the Branded, and are made to understand that equality is the most important cornerstone of the hideaway. Cid curates it all. All of this on the back end of starting to learn what it means to be a leader at this scale. Everyone helps with everything when there is equality. The beginning of an important lesson for Clive's future role in the hideaway, by having the player engage in a way that gives you small anecdotes about the NPC's lives. It creates a greater impact of the hideaway's destruction hours later. Equality is a strong theme of 16, and it persists in the game's side content. Despite Clive's iconic ability and greater purpose, he's never made to feel greater than the people around him. 16 side quests can suffer as a result of the structure of the game. You are often given many all at once in spaced intervals. It works for most of the game, however, despite their consistency in content, the game can often have issues deciding what should or shouldn't be required viewing. Before the finale of the game, you are given 11 side quests that act as a way for Clive to individually reflect with all of the game's main cast before Journey's End. The issue being that in this case, all 11 of these quests are optional despite being some of the most important full circle narrative content in the game. If you had already stopped doing side content up until this point, the impact of the game's finale carries far different weight. All of the interests of your closest allies are laid out. and it opens you up to your most vulnerable state right before there's no time left. Going into the final push for freedom with all of these conversations being front of mind makes what comes next far more emotional. Final Fantasy XV had a very practical implementation of character interests. Noctis's love for fishing and how deep its systems were in-game don't feel off course due to the road trip and survival nature of the game's jumping off point. In an effort to develop Noctis as self-sufficient, it's a system that pairs well with the general feeling of the camping lifestyle and curating your own food, which in turn enhances other systems such as Ignis's cooking ability. End of Day feels a bit more realistic when the things you eat are cultivated during that day. Noctis clearly loves fishing. It's made apparent all throughout the game. It's not unusual to assume that an activity such as that could also make one feel a little bit closer to home post the unexpected death of a father. 15's side questing always feels like it was affected by the troubled nature of its development, but a lot of it still works in the context of who Noctis is becoming. He's a character that can't have a full understanding of the realities of the outside world. But by the time the game is in its final hours, it's clear Noctis is a far different person. He by no means had an easy life, but he knows he plays a monumental role in giving people a better chance than he did. The optional encounters are powerful and focused on the game's themes. Going on individual hangs with each of the guys to have heart-to-hearts based on what their interests are plays a huge role in reminding you of what's important. Despite what's happening, these are still just people who want to have the opportunity to take their minds off things. The game's side content excels outside of the standard quest lines that you expect. For all the criticism 15 gets for some of the burden it had to bear, it has a world map that doesn't overwhelm you with useless content, in a time where this was all open world studios knew how to do. When all was said and done, Final Fantasy XV chose to lean into the feeling of getting up to nonsense with your friends. The side content that worked is still better than most of its competition. There isn't a better fishing minigame. It's hard to even justify calling it mini. While they didn't nail the standard quests themselves, all of the other side content that arrives unconventionally was incredibly thoughtful and enhanced its characters. This genre still has so many creative ways to implement side content. There isn't an objective way to write or design or create art in general. We all have different things that affect us, and there can always be more meaning where you least expect it. It's important that we all try our best to see it. Final Fantasy has gone through many iterations on what side content can mean. However, despite some obvious flaws that still need ironing out, there is still more care placed into when these quests are given to you than most of the games coming out around them. All that's needed is a little fine-tuning.